Hello and welcome to this new episode of Making Way to #Inclusive Community, a podcast of hope, a collaborative initiative by Bachpan Ke Pitare Se and Little Storytellers. Books. We all know books are our true friends, and that's why we have another author with us today. Vikas Prakash Joshi, who is a writer by nature, not compulsion, ambition, or conscious choice. He loves waking up and falling asleep to the sound of rain, crisp chicken popcorn, chocolate Nutella, and well written mystery stories. He hates early morning flights, cool weather, and delayed meals. From his childhood days, his favorite sentences have always been, "Come, hear my story. Come, tell me a story." He firmly believes that we are all stories of the stories we tell other people and stories we tell ourselves. Welcome, Vikas, to our platform, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hearty welcome.
Thank you, Deepa ji. Thank you, Neena ji. Pleasure to be here and thank you for this opportunity.
और सबसे पहले तो हम आपको थैंक यू बोलेंगे कि आपने इतनी बढ़िया बुक लिखी है एंड बीइंग एन इंडियन ऑथर राइटिंग सच ब्यूटीफुल such nice book in English. It's hats off because these days we find very few Indian authors writing good English books. So congratulations for that also. And with this,
Thank
let
you.
me ask you a couple of questions because as you know, this theme is diversity and inclusion. So being an author and especially with your book, My Name is Cinnamon, which is widely appreciated, and Nina and I both have loved reading every word of it. So what do you think about diversity and inclusion? And how do you think the books contribute to creating an inclusive community? Or maybe what's the role of books or authors to create this inclusive community?
Deepa, that's very interesting question, about diversity. So generally, when we talk about diversity, Deepa ji, we look at it in terms of physical things. That's what, for example, people from different parts of the country, people speaking different languages, people having different religions, people from different castes. You are from Bangalore, I'm from Pune, Neena ji is in Kerala, somebody is in Delhi, somebody is in Assam, like that. So that's one kind of diversity. But
Correct.
in this book, I am also presenting that there are many, many kinds of diversities. Diversity in political views, diversity in thought processes, diversity even in the way we look at male-female relations.
Right.
Even within a relationship, the husband can be very, very traditional, and the wife may want more greater freedom. So diversity is of many, many kinds. And when we talk about being inclusive, we must not only talk about being inclusive of physical things, though that's important, but also about things which are not physical. For example, what I'm trying to say is that a person may be differently abled. That's one kind of
Okay. Yes.
inclusivity. But you can have three people who all superficially are all from the same caste, same community, same state, but their political views may be totally different. So then, that diversity, creating that space where people can express and also accept the other person's opinion, the other person's perspective. That's also very important. And now to come to your second question, how do books create it? I believe that a child, especially when you're writing children's books have one uniqueness, that children's minds till a certain age are like a sponge. वो sponge की तरह रहते हैं, वो
Correct.
चीजों को
हाँ,
absorb करते हैं.
absorb करते हैं.
So what I feel is that when we write children's books and we show things as if they are normal, the child also at some level gets influenced by it. And if we show, for example, like in my book, I've showed he's adopted and it's okay. In fact, most of the people around him don't make an issue about him being adopted. It is he himself somewhere deep down has that feeling. So this is an example of literature showcasing that being adopted is okay. It's no big deal. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just part of life. Now, vice versa, there are some books. If you have read some books by um, Ramendra Kumar, or if you have read a famous book by called Lion by Saru Brierley, that brings out the theme of adoption. So I think literature at its best has one advantage, and that is that literature shows us new worlds. You know, literature shows us new possibilities, and
Yes,
that's the best part of it.
agree.
I think, yeah, as you said, book plays an important role in anybody's life, right? Be it regarding communication or building a vocabulary or getting to know many things. So when I got your book and while looking at the title, that is, My Name is Cinnamon. Why the name? Why? What inspired you for that particular name?
Yeah, that's cinnamon is actually mine, and in fact, generally speaking, ज्यादातर लोगों का बहुत favorite flavor रहता है.
Yes.
People like cinnamon in tea, cinnamon bun.
हाँ
Like this
हाँ
Deepa ji is smiling. Maybe she's thinking
हाँ
about a cinnamon roll. Maybe after this interview,
हाँ
she'll
Yes.
want to have a cinnamon roll.
हाँ हाँ
You
Cinnamon
know,
मतलब
donuts.
cinnamon
So
मतलब
cinnamon,
दालचीनी
exactly,
huh?
dalchini.
दालचीनी.
दालचीनी
अच्छा,
cinnamon
दालचीनी.
दालचीनी मतलब जो
दालचीनी.
लोग
उसको
नहीं जानते
दाल में डालो
दालचीनी
तो भी बढ़िया फ्लेवर आता है,
बढ़िया
और
flavor.
चीनी
हाँ
वाली चीजों में, मीठी चीजों में डालो तो भी उसका
तो भी
फ्लेवर हो
फ्लेवर बहुत
जाता है.
बढ़िया. So cinnamon is a very universally appealing thing. People across the world love
हाँ
it, and India is
हाँ
one of the biggest producers of cinnamon. So one
हाँ
level, like when I was a child, I used to love to ask my parents to bug my parents that I want a cinnamon bun, or I want a cinnamon roll. That is always my favorite
ओके
with tea.
Okay.
That is one
ओके
factor. And the other
हाँ
thing also was that when I was growing up, there were certain words which I found difficult to pronounce, like
ओके
perpendicular. You
हाँ
know,
हाँ.
हाँ हाँ हाँ
then in geometry we have a thing called a parallelogram. You know,
Yes.
पैरेललोग्राम राइट
parallelogram. Or we
हाँ
have this triangle. It's called even now I
हेक्सागन
forgot. Huh?
हेक्सागन
नहीं
नहीं नहीं,
नहीं,
there's a kind of triangle. एक
ओके
triangle रहता
ट्रायंगल
है geometry
ओके
class
isosceles
में.
triangle.
Correct,
आइसोसेलेस
correct.
हाँ
Isosceles.
करेक्ट
I used to rip up. I used to solve it. Isosceles or isosceles, or I used to find it
हाँ
difficult to
हाँ हाँ
pronounce.
हाँ
This
हाँ
particular cinnamon, I would say cinnamon,
हाँ हाँ
synonym.
हाँ
So my English teacher, she had
हाँ
dubbed me as cinnamon. Cinnamon. She would
ओके
make me say
ओके
it. So that's why
ओके
from that time, for a few days, in fact, she had started calling me cinnamon. So
हाँ
then
हाँ
I
हाँ
then it just stayed in my mind somewhere. So then I thought,
ओके
okay, when I write a children's book, I must use this.
हाँ but I think that is matching with your character as well. The child who is playing the main character in your this, who has adapted to the situation where he's growing, and even
Hmm.
after knowing that he has been adopted, he is adjusting to that. And I can
Hmm.
see the sequence happening in his life where he's meeting his biological mom, you know. So the title is now very clear. दालचीनी cinnamon क्यों रखा आपने, वो क्योंकि वो घुल रहा है सबके साथ. तो
Hmm.
I think that is what you wanted to tell people also, है ना. यही मुझे लग रहा है, जो जितना मैं समझ सकी आपके बातों से. और मुझे भी शायद यही फील हुआ जब मैं ये पढ़ रही थी. तो मुझे लगता है कि बहुत ही एप्ट टाइटल आपने दिया इसको, है ना दीपा.
Yes, there is in fact a kind of amusing thing about the title, which I often joke about even now, that I had presented 3, 4 titles, and my last preference was My Name is Cinnamon. There were 3 other titles I wanted more. The publisher said, okay, even I don't like this title, My Name is Cinnamon, but for the time being, let's give us that title. Let's keep the other titles for the side. Later on, when we finish the book, we'll come back to it, because किताब लिखने में जितना समय जाता है उससे डबल समय जाता है टू फाइंड द टाइटल. टाइटल इज ऑलवेज मोर डिफिकल्ट बिकॉज इट इज द
करेक्ट
मोस्ट. वो किताब का पहल होता है या उसका पहचान होता है, द
करेक्ट करेक्ट
टाइटल एंड द कवर.
हाँ
सो एट द एंड व्हेन आई आस्क्ड देम दैट व्हाट डू यू थिंक, we were both somehow we had come to the conclusion that let us forget these 3 other titles, let us go with this one only.
वेल डन.
So it's like that. The title which was least preferred became the most preferred by the time, because it was like as we edited the book, we realized that this is the most apt.
करेक्ट
This
करेक्ट
is the title which conveys.
करेक्ट करेक्ट
Correct. So
मतलब
this,
अपने आप में यूनिक, बट सबके साथ जाने वाला, मतलब बहुत
Yeah.
बहुत सोच समझ। करेक्ट। या दीपा?
मुझे ना एक चीज और पूछनी थी विकास जी। एक तो आज काफी टाइम से मैं भी लैंग्वेजेस पढ़ा रही हूँ, या मैं खुद भी स्टोरी टेलिंग में इंटरेस्टेड हूँ, स्टोरी टेलर भी हूँ। लेकिन अगर मैं कहानियां ढूंढती हूँ तो टीनेजर्स के लिए बहुत कम कहानियां मिलती हैं, एंड दैट टू बाय इंडियन ऑथर्स। इंडियन बुक्स बहुत कम है। एक तो मुझे ये टाइटल ने अट्रैक्ट किया था, माय नेम इज सिनेमन। और जब मैंने अपनी बेटी को दिखाया या कुछ और बच्चों को, तो उनको ना जो आपके कवर पेज जो है उसने बहुत अट्रैक्ट किया। और जब मैं अपनी क्लासेस लेती हूँ ना, तो आई मेड श्योर कि आई विल कीप दिस समवेयर। क्योंकि जब मैं पढ़ा रही हूँ, अगर किसी बच्चे को उसमें इंटरेस्ट नहीं आ रहा है, या कोई जल्दी आ गया, या कोई देर से जा रहा है, जिसके पेरेंट्स देर से आ रहे हैं, तो आई कीप सम बुक्स फॉर देम टू रीड। तो ये इस टाइटल ने उनको बड़ा अट्रैक्ट किया था, एंड दे ऑलवेज वांटेड टू रीड कि ये किस किस कहानी है और क्या है। और एक तो ये चीज कि आपने अटेम्प्ट किया टीनेजर्स के लिए कुछ लिखने के लिए, दैट वाज वन, दैट इज रियली वन ऑफ द ग्रेट थिंग्स। द सेकेंड थिंग वाज, आपने बहुत डिफरेंट टॉपिक्स चूज किए हैं। इनमें दो चीजों को हाईलाइट किया है। एक था अडॉप्शन, टू मेक इट नॉर्मल, विच इज नॉर्मल इन फैक्ट, लेकिन आज भी बहुत सारे लोगों को प्रेजुडिसेस हैं। और टूवर्ड्स, मतलब एक और आपने एक सरप्राइज एलिमेंट रखा था सब रीडर्स के लिए। तो हाउ कम यू कंबाइंड दीज टू एलिमेंट्स? आई वोंट गिव द सरप्राइज व्हाट एग्जैक्टली, लेकिन आप कैसे आई इस कॉम्बिनेशन के बारे में? आपने कैसे सोचा टीनेजर्स के बारे में भी? मतलब हाउ डिड यू कम अप विद द आइडिया ऑफ राइटिंग फॉर देम, एंड स्पेशली ऑन दीज टू टॉपिक्स?
Right. Deepa, there's a saying that if you see a book which you would like to read, but it's not there, then you should consider writing that book. That is something I've read somewhere that, अगर आपको वैसा किताब नहीं मिलता है जो आपको पढ़ना है, तो आपको लिखना चाहिए. And one of the things I realized when I went to the crossword in different parts of the country is that there are a lot of children's books in English by Indian authors for children below a certain. That has last 10, 15 years, that has really grown. Like in the past 10, 15 years ago, had you said to me that who are the books for the children below a certain age by Indian authors, I would have said कि बहुत कम है, famous 5, secret 7, ये यही है. But अभी वो बहुत बढ़ गई. There are so many authors doing really good work. If you take baby books for children, these picture books बहुत बढ़ गए,
बहुत है।
and that too by Indian authors,
इंडियन ऑथर्स की बहुत अच्छी बुक्स हैं। मतलब
बहुत
इनफैक्ट
अच्छी.
जो फ्री रिसोर्स है हम लोगों का सबका, स्टोरी वीवर्स जो ऑनलाइन फ्री रिसोर्स है, दैट हैज बिकम वेरी कॉमन, स्पेशली लॉकडाउन के बाद से। तो उसमें बहुत अच्छी अच्छी बुक्स हैं, बट देन अगेन उसको देखूं या मैं आसपास की लाइब्रेरीज में जाके देखूं, तो टीनेजर्स के लिए हार्डली डू आई फाइंड गुड
Yes.
बुक्स।
Yeah, so that is the point. When I saw this kind of lack, I thought that I must write a book which is aimed at children, say above the age of 11 or 12. Though children as young as 8 or 9 can read, and as old as 15, 16 can also read. But roughly 11, 12 से 15, 16 इस ये जो एज गैप है, तो उनके लिए मैंने सोचा ये लिखना चाहिए. And adopted, that thing came, they say that the author doesn't choose the story, but the story chooses the author. So when I that's a saying which I've read, and I used to always say it's a cliche, but when you write, you realize that that cliche comes from somewhere, right? Cliche is because there's truth to that cliche. So then when I wrote it, I realized that this is an adopted boy, and I read a story about in a newspaper about a Chinese boy who was adopted, and then he was adopted by an American family. एंड वो बहुत आई हैड अ हैबिट एट वन टाइम दैट मैं कभी न्यूज़पेपर या मैगजीन पढ़ता था, तो कहीं ना कहीं अगर मुझे कुछ ऐसा मिला विच आई फेल्ट दैट दिस कैन बी द basis for a book or a short story or an essay or a novel or whatever, I would just cut it out and keep it aside, like a clipping or a notebook. And this thing stayed in my mind. So I just cut it and I clipped it and kept it aside. And then I forgot about it. Then much later, when I was sort of writing it, then I saw this, and then it triggered that thing in my mind that I'm looking for that when you're writing, you're looking to hit the rhythm. जैसे हम कोई
करेक्ट।
गाना गाता है, जैसे कि अभी एकदम सुर में गा रही है, वो एकदम सुर में गए. So it's like when you write, sometimes you just hit that moment and you know this is it. So that's what the first point, it is adoption. And the second thing what I realized about adoption is that adoption ये एक बहुत ही, for Indians adoption is there through Karna, through the story of Krishna, through the story of I think other mythological elements, and adoption is like for through mythology is a normal thing. But when it
Correct.
comes to the modern day adoption, कहीं ना कहीं वो prejudice आ गया है that adoption is something bad, and Bollywood movies में हमेशा वैसा दिखाते हैं that you may have seen of course yourself that okay Deepa, not you but you know I'm just giving you your name, that she is
That's
standing
okay.
वो खिड़की के बाहर खड़ी है, she
Hmm.
hears her father and mother talking to her mother. Oh, when will you tell Deepa that she is actually adopted? And then his father says, oh, no, no, we cannot tell. Mother says, we
Correct.
must tell one day. You know, so that has created that thing. Okay, my
Yes,
God, you're adopted. How does it feel? But what I want to show is that it need not be like that. You know, and it should not be like that. In fact, it should be
exactly.
something normal. You know?
करेक्ट करेक्ट
That's true.
करेक्ट। अब जब दीपा ने छेड़ ही दिया है बात सरप्राइज एलिमेंट की, जैसे एक वर्ड तो हो गया, अब दूसरा सरप्राइज ये है कि you have mentioned about a syndrome which actually comes towards the almost towards the end of the story, right? So what is the syndrome that you have talked about in the book? And one more thing before you tell about this, have you met someone suffering from that disease, or what exactly the syndrome? So you can tell us, uh, our audience, either in Hindi, English, so that it is easily,
Understood.
relatable to them to understand what exactly the syndrome is, and how do you come to know about this syndrome?
Right, right. You see, the syndrome which we are talking about here, that syndrome I have met a few people connected to that. In fact, several people, not one or two, but several people, both in India
Okay.
as well as in USA. I've met
Okay.
several organizations in India, USA, Israel. These three
Oh,
countries, I've met people involved in working for this. And I've also met a few people in Europe who are
oh,
connected to this syndrome and who are working in this field, and a few people whose own children have this syndrome, you know, who are working in it.
okay.
So when I interviewed them, I got a lot of insights. Plus, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of information online
Mm-hmm.
about. So I combined both the information, which is like the secondary information, and then the
Mm-hmm.
primary information. Actually talking to people, getting their
Mm-hmm.
perspective, asking them questions, and many a times what happens is these are people who um, can't talk to you so easily because of their issues. They need to talk through somebody else, or they use some other
Okay.
software. So that is a bit challenging.
Okay.
But you can overcome these challenges.
So the term, what is it actually known as?
Usher syndrome.
Usher syndrome.
Yeah.
So, when any idea, like you said, you have been doing the research, you have been talking to those people. So, if you talk about other disabilities, like if you talk about spectrum, it is like many of the parents say that either when the child was 8 months, or 1 year or 2 year, or some, for even some, it was on the later age when they came to know about the syndrome. So, what or when do they diagnose, or when do they come to know, when do people come to know that they are going through this syndrome? Any such information?
You see, the age can vary a lot depending on the severity. That is
Okay.
also one question, because the Usher syndrome is a very rare syndrome. It's something
Mm-hmm.
which happens to maybe, one in like, a few million. It is so rare. That's why it's called a rare
Okay.
disease.
Rare
But
disease. Okay.
very rare. So that there are three
Okay.
types, type 1, type 2, type 3.
Okay.
Generally, they say type 3 is the mildest. You see, the Usher is
Oh.
basically that the person's faculties keep deteriorating at a young age. But in type 3, what happens is the hearing part deteriorates faster, and the visual
Mm-hmm.
part deteriorates slower. Whereas in the first one and first we type 1, type 2, it deteriorates faster. So generally speaking, they if the doctor is aware about this syndrome, they may diagnose it at a very young age, because in type 1, type 2, the symptoms show up very early. In type 3, it
Very
may
young.
take longer because the symptoms take much longer to show. It may be in the teens or it may be even late teens, you know. It takes, and
Okay.
also there's one more point which somebody with Usher once said to me, which can be challenging, is teenagers by nature can sometimes be clumsy or can sometimes be very disobedient or they may not listen.
Mm-hmm.
So the parents may not immediately realize that if the child is not paying attention to you, it's
Mm.
because he's being disobedient. You know, that is,
Okay.
they may think that a child is just not interested. That's all. You know,
Maybe
which is
the
a common
age,
thing. Huh?
maybe the changing age, they may consider it as maybe it is a changing, that stage when a teenager doesn't listen to. Maybe
Right.
that.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, it may they may not be, because one person who I spoke to with Asha, I remember she said that she realized that her son has type 3 Usher when he suddenly started. It's, you know, you have to call him more than once, call him
Has
multiple
anyone
times.
though whom you have contacted or whom you, so have they said that is there any cure, because it is rare, of course, and you said it's a rare disease. Is there any treatment or medicine for this?
There is a treatment of it, but there's no cure. To the best of my knowledge, they're experimenting with various kinds of cures, but
Okay.
I don't think as of now there is no known cure that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's
Let
very good that you brought that into this book. It was it was very important that people should know about, because we know about SMA, muscular disorders, and all those things which are rare. So
Right.
this one also, I think people should know about and should be aware of what exactly is. Yeah, Deepa.
No, that's true. That's what even I was about to say, Nina. And
Mm-hmm.
और एक चीज हमने नोटिस की थ्रू आउट द बुक, जैसे ना इट अपियर्ड एज इफ, एक तो आपने बात की एक फैमिली में ही देयर कैन बी अ डाइवर्सिटी, राइट? वी आर लिविंग टुगेदर इन फैमिली ऑल्सो। अगर हम फैमिली की बात छोड़ो, अगर हम अपनी 5 उंगलियां देखें, दे आर अलग साइजेस, राइट? और कितना हम मिलके रहते हैं। इसी तरह से द फैमिली, द हस्बैंड हैज अ डिफरेंट डिस्टिंक्ट टेस्ट, वाइफ हैज अ डिस्टिंक्ट टेस्ट, द सन हैज अ डिस्टिंक्ट टेस्ट, और बहुत सारी फूड की, खाने की बहुत सारी बातें की, और इतनी सारी वैरायटी आपने डाली थी ना खाने की। आई वाज लाइक on a roller coaster ride, क्योंकि out of them, most of my mom also comes from Maharashtra, and I
Hmm.
was born and brought up in Madhya Pradesh, and I also have that, I have got best friends with in different castes. तो फूड का क्या इम्पोर्टेंस होता है एक बुक में? व्हाट इज दिस फूड ऐड टू? इन योर बुक एडेड अ लॉट ऑफ फ्लेवर्स एंड इट एडेड अ लॉट ऑफ वैल्यू टू इट। वो बता रहा था, एक कैरेक्टर डेवलप हो रहा था, मेरे ख्याल से अलग अलग कैरेक्टर्स उस फूड के थ्रू डेवलप हो रहे थे, बट ओवरऑल हाउ डज फूड इम्पैक्ट a book, or how often or how less should it be used? uh, you understood what I'm trying to ask.
Yes, yes. You know, actually, it's on a lighter note. I should say on a lighter, two things. One is that, you know, as you know, that my book is being translated now into 5 languages.
Yes.
Yes, yes. And the translator sometimes do tell me that the first time around when we read about your book, you read your book, we enjoyed all the food descriptions, but now that we are doing it in all these languages, we are, you know, racking our head that, okay, do we keep the same name? If we keep the same name, then do we describe it or do we leave it undescribed, you know? So I said,
Exactly.
look, when I read books from Kerala, they would mention about appam and stew and all, but there was no explanation. What is appam? What is stew?
Yeah.
What is tapioca? What is
Yeah.
the, you know, plantain curry? You know, something banana
Huh.
curry
Yes.
prepared in a sabji type. So I said I
Huh.
never. There was no explanation. So on now to answer your question seriously, you know, food is a very good way of doing several things at once. One is through food you can bring out the person's personality. For example, does he like to eat a lot, or is he a very finicky eater? You know, is he somebody who likes a lot of sweet things, or does he prefer spicy food? Is he somebody who's very particular about the food he eats, or will he eat just pretty much anything? You know, is he very particular about meal timings, or is he kind of very negligent about it? You know, some people are very particular about eating food at a certain time. You know, बाकी सब रहे ना रहे, but खाना तो उस समय ही होना
They-
चाहिए. They even so, food does one advantage of food is you can bring out a person's personality. The second advantage of food, I would say, in a country like India, where we have not just variations between state to state, even within the same state, we have Delhi
Yes.
style chaat, we have Indore style chaat, we have Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow style. Then we have communities like Muslims, Sindhis. They have their own cuisine, which is distinct from the state they are part of. You
Correct.
know, so then all this means that you get a lot of scope in India to use food to bring out the regional variations, the diversities, the varieties of people. And I would say
Correct.
third, the major advantage of food is through food, you can show the character's mood also. If the person is in a happy
Hmm.
mood, you can show him
Hmm.
eating something which is fits in with that. If the
Hmm.
person is in a depressed mood, you can show that he's kind of not very bothered. जो है वो
हाँ
खा रहा है because उसके
हाँ
दिमाग तो में कुछ और चल रहा है.
हाँ.
Because when we are
Hmm.
happy, we tend to say, okay, let me have this, let me have that. When
Correct.
we are unhappy, in fact, when you are very unhappy, you may not even care that much. You may
हाँ
lose your
हाँ
appetite. खाने का मन नहीं कर रहा है, because of X, Y, Z. So
हाँ.
food is that all these roles in
लेकिन एक चीज मैंने
everything.
देखा है, कई लोग, सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट यू, जब आपने फूड के बारे में बोला कि जब मूड खराब होता है तो खाने का मन नहीं करता, लेकिन कई बार ये भी देखा, उल्टा भी देखा है कि जब किसी का मूड खराब होता है बहुत खा जाते हैं, बाद में कहते हैं मेरा मूड खराब था, मैं खाता गया खाता, मतलब दैट टेंडेंसी टू ईट मोर, ये भी देखा है. तो
Yeah,
यस यू आर राइट, फूड प्लेज एन इम्पोर्टेंट रोल, बहुत कुछ कनेक्ट करता है. एंड आई थिंक ये जो आपने तरीका अपनाया, मतलब इतने सारे चीजों को एक शॉर्ट में, एक किताब में जो आपने इंक्लूड किया, बहुत लोगों को मतलब इसको, मतलब और इसको लैंग्वेज, दूसरे लैंग्वेज में भी आपने इसको मतलब ट्रांसलेट किया, एडॉप्शन एंड देन अबाउट द सिंड्रोम, सो यू हैव कनेक्टेड ऑल दोस थिंग्स एंड नाउ ट्रांसलेशन ऑफ दोस बुक्स is definitely going to help other people, even the common people, to understand what exactly the book is and what is it about. So it's a good thought. Yeah, Deepa, after food, let's go to, I think we are going to another part.
यस यस. सो मतलब मुझे अच्छा लगा था कि कुछ एक एज के लिए, एक स्पेसिफिक एज के लिए यू प्रोवाइडेड सम फूड फॉर थॉट. देन देर आर मेनी इमोशनल प्लेसेस वेयर you bring about the emotional conversation that goes in within this cinnamon's mind. वो बहुत अच्छे से आपने डिपिक्ट किया, जो मैं देखती हूँ अक्सर टीनेजर्स में, when they cannot speak out. एंड लाइक बहुत जरूरी है ना इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस को, इंडियन लिटरेचर को प्रमोट करना. सो वुड यू लाइक टू से समथिंग अबाउट इट, एंड देन आफ्टर दैट सम पार्टिंग वर्ड्स.
yeah. I would say that last 10-15 years, one positive thing which I've seen in India is that people are becoming more and more interested in the Indian aspects. This is a trend
करेक्ट.
I have observed, even upper middle class people. There was like a culture where people would take pride in not really being aware of things. Even shadi mein, people embrace their own culture. Even Indians who have gone abroad, they
करेक्ट.
they have Indian weddings abroad. In fact, there are some cases where both the husband and wife both are foreigners only, not Indians. They're both foreigners, but they still want to have an Indian wedding. So ये भी मैंने देखा है, where neither the groom
करेक्ट.
or the bride are Indians. So I think that Indian languages may a lot of things are quite good. Newspapers, magazines, television channels, soap operas, ये सब चल रहा है. Like I can say in Marathi, Tamil, Hindi, newspapers, magazines, but the lacuna is children's books, खास करके children's books which are not in this, preachy, this is the moral of the story. Like we have all, Deepa ji, I should take you down memory lane, Champak, and the famous,
नंदन,
the,
नंदन
and,
नाम की एक हिंदी मैगजीन होती
नंदन,
थी.
Nandan,
चंपक, चाचा
yes,
चौधरी.
Chacha Chaudhary. Then this also Chanda Mama used to be there. Chanda
चंदा
हाँ,
मामा.
Mama.
चंदा
यस.
मामा, हाँ
Chanda
हाँ
Mama.
हाँ हाँ
So that
हाँ.
that is still there, those kind of magazines. But when you talk about Indian language content for children, which is not, like Panchatantra or Aesop tables or morals, it is actually a story. वो आज भी इतना, नहीं दिखता है, जितना दिखना चाहिए. Even today, like I remember a person who knows Assamese telling me that between a well-published English book with attractive illustrations and a simple-looking Assamese or Hindi book with simple, I mean, खुद दीपा जी आपको हिंदी बहुत अच्छा पता है. You will observe many of the Hindi children's books, sometimes the illustrations are very simple. Cover is
यस.
sometimes very simple. So when even as a Hindi knowing and Hindi speaking person like yourself, your instinct will be what? To pick up the English book. By instinct you will pick up that. That's how children are. जो थोड़ा attractive है वही लोग gravitate करेंगे. So I
Correct.
think that's the thing that needs to be done as far as Indian literature for kids is concerned, because there is a desire to read in Indian languages for children, but in a language which is kind of interesting and entertaining. This whole moral of the story, we have all grown up with that. हाँ, story का moral क्या है? In school also, they would tell you a story and then they would say, what is the moral of the story? So we need to move away from that. This is what I feel.
नहीं, और मुझे सबसे अच्छी बात मुझे और नीना को जो लगी थी ना इस बुक की, जब शुरू किया था तो तब मुझे लग रहा था कि एक तो पहले जब मैंने ली तो एक इंडियन ऑथर ने इंग्लिश बुक लिखी है तो पता नहीं कितनी अच्छी लिखी होगी, टू बी ऑनेस्ट वो डाउट था,
हाँ
एंड आई एम सेइंग
हाँ
दिस ऑन
हाँ
एयर। बट
हाँ
जैसे जैसे मैं पढ़ती गई ऐसे ऐसे मुझे रियलाइज हुआ कि नहीं, ये काम तो बहुत अच्छा हुआ है, एंड इट इज
हाँ
इंटरेस्टिंग। और सबसे बड़ी बात जो थी दैट वाज रिलेटेबिलिटी। इंडियन
करेक्ट
कॉन्टेक्स्ट को ध्यान में रख के, इंडियन माइंडसेट को ध्यान में रखते हुए, उनके जो इंटर कल्चरल डिफरेंसेस हैं, आपने जैसे वो बहुत
हाँ
खूबसूरती से पोर्ट्रे किया था जब वो ट्रैवल
हाँ
कर रहे हैं पुणे से गांव की तरफ, तो
हाँ
वो गांव के सीन को मैं एक्चुअली विजुअलाइज कर पा रही थी, है ना। वो बस में कैसे धक्के लगते हैं, वो ट्रेन में हमें कितने घंटे खड़े होना पड़ता है स्टेशन पे,
हाँ
सो दैट इज
हाँ
सो रिलेटेबल व्हेन आई एम रीडिंग दोज इंग्लिश बुक्स बाय इंग्लिश ऑथर्स। Sometimes I'm into some fantasy land, but then there is this uh,
कनेक्ट
एक कुछ चीजें जो
डिस्कनेक्ट
होती है ना वो कनेक्ट नहीं हो पाती, और मुझे सबसे
नहीं
अच्छी
होता है।
बात इस बुक की यही लगी थी कि मैं कनेक्ट कर पा रही हूँ, कोई मेरी भावना को समझ रहा है, कोई
हाँ
मेरी भावना एक्सप्रेस कर रहा है, एंड इट्स हैट्स ऑफ दैट यू आर गेटिंग दिस ट्रांसलेटेड इन सो मेनी लैंग्वेजेस। It is very important for us as parents and educators and authors. We should promote our culture, why not? बाकी लोगों के जो हम सीक्रेट सेवन और ये फेमस फाइव और जितनी भी बढ़िया
सही कहा
बुक्स हैं, हैरी पॉटर, ये वो, हम क्यों बाहर का कल्चर सिर्फ हम इंपोर्ट कर रहे हैं? वी कैन एक्सपोर्ट आवर कल्चर आल्सो, राइट? एंड व्हाट बेस्ट वे अदर देन द बुक्स, written in such simple language, easy to understand, but not at so simple कि हम उसको literally उसमें थोड़ा सा नीचे रखें, but it was at par. So that was the best part, I think, and thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
I
Thank
really appreciate वो towards the end, और फिर जब आपने जैसे जैसे एक एक धागा खोला, ऐसे ऐसे एक एक थोड़ा थोड़ा सस्पेंस वो हो रहा था, I was like, okay, I underestimated this book. I underestimated this author. I should say sorry to him. And if you remember, I sent you a message also, voice message also,
Yes.
कि विकास जी मैंने शुरू
yeah
किया था, मुझे उतना अच्छा नहीं लग रहा था, लेकिन जब मैं एंड में आई तो मैं छोड़ नहीं पाई आधे में। I
हाँ
couldn't leave that
मुझे
book.
पता है आई एम सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट क्योंकि
नहीं
वो
नहीं।
जब आप बोल रहे थे ना तो मुझे वो हाईलाइट जैसे वो रेसोनेट कर रहे थे हम लोग एक एक जिस ट्रैवल का और जब वो अपनी माँ से मिल रहा है कैसे वो उसकी फेवरेट चीजें बना रही है वो अपने भाइयों के बारे में पूछ रहे हैं जैसे होता है ना कि हम लोग जब वेकेशंस में जाते हैं अपने कजिन्स के बारे में पूछते हैं और वो खास डिशेस पूछते हैं जो हम वेरी रेयरली हम बाहर रह के खाते हैं क्योंकि वो मटेरियल वहां नहीं मिलता होगा आजकल तो सब मिलने लगे हैं हालांकि उस टाइम नहीं होता था तो जैसे दीपा ने बोला वो कनेक्ट हो रहा था और मेरी और दीपा की भी जब डिस्कशन हो रही थी तो हम यही कह रहे थे कि शुरू से लेके जब आप करते हो एक आर्ट है द पेस को स्लो एंड वो मिडिल में आते आते लास्ट में ऐसा होता है कि वाह मजा आ गया पढ़ के एंड आई थिंक अभी दूसरे लैंग्वेजेस में थे मैं तो वेट कर रही हूँ मलयालम में आए और मैं पढ़ू उसको आई थिंक इट वाज द मोस्ट नीडेड थिंग एंड व्हाई आर वी डिस्कसिंग दिस हियर बिकॉज everybody as parents we want other parents to know that we have good Indian writers and good books for especially for teenagers as you said for younger kids we have books picture books and all those things by Karadi Tulika all but
Pratham.
after 12 you see that being the librarian in me comes out because after the age of 12 when a 13-year-old child comes and asks what do we have to read because famous five and all is now boring for them and it Blyton is boring for them they need something so now they have this book in you I think with this Deepa we can you can come on to your
Yes.
part
नो नो, आई सो मच एग्री, एंड थैंक यू विकास जी, आपने बहुत सारी इंसाइट्स दी। और मैं एक्चुअली हम लोग रेकमेंड करेंगे ये बुक पढ़ने के लिए, इसलिए नहीं कि आपको हमने इंटरव्यू में बुलाया है आप आए हैं, इसलिए नहीं, सिर्फ इसलिए क्योंकि हमें अपने इंडियन रूट से जुड़े रहना चाहिए। और आपने बहुत ब्यूटीफुली, बहुत सुंदर तरीके से इसमें कुछ ऐसे टॉपिक्स उठाए हैं जो लोग बात करने में कतराते हैं। और क्योंकि एडॉप्शन पे मेरे कुछ क्लोज फ्रेंड्स, नियर फैमिली में मैंने देखा है बहुत लोगों को, उनके मन में जो उधेड़-बुन रहती है, आपने बहुत खूबसूरती से उसको डाला है। और मेरे स्टूडेंट्स का जो है, उनका भी रिस्पॉन्स बहुत अच्छा था कि मैम वी वांट टू रीड। तो बच्चों के लिए बहुत अच्छा रीड है, अडल्ट्स के लिए बहुत अच्छा रीड है। तो yeah, thank you so much for
Yes,
giving your
welcome.
time.
I have all the
Thank
pleasure
you.
to give the time, and you must tell your students कि अगर किताब पढ़ना है तो जरूर अमेजोन से खरीद सकते हैं, और अमेजोन से ज्यादा in fact they can even write to their, they can even ask the schools, some
Yeah.
of the schools have added it to their library, so because
हाँ हाँ.
बच्चे को कैसा है Amazon में, they will not be able to buy it from Amazon, but the school can keep a few copies
School
for
can have it. Yes, yes.
that, because
Yeah.
Amazon में कैसा है इशू इज, if Deepa buys a copy then वो सिर्फ दीपे के पास ही रहेगा, but स्कूल में अगर
Correct,
कॉपी
correct.
आएगा then everybody can
Huh,
read.
huh. So it's
Right.
a good thought. I think this is something that we were looking forward, that people will be thinking why inclusion and diversity and authors, because we want to tell everyone that books also play an important role in our life. So thank you once again.
So with this, we wind up this episode, and thank you. We'll be back in another episode with some new person, new insights. Thank you so much. Keep listening to Bachpan Ke Pitare Se and Little Storytellers. Have a great day.
All the best from all of us, signing off.